the last thing you need is your nursing staff that trained for all of these years to learn how to provide compassionate care to patients, then turn around and within a few years sustain a musculoskeletal injury that's gonna hamper them for the rest of their career, potentially limit it, make them want to leave the career and do something else. That's not what we need. They went into the field because they want to do it. So now let's offload some of the extra burden that they have and allow them to do exactly what you said, work at the top of their license.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today we're joined by a physician innovator tackling one of healthcare's most overlooked operational bottlenecks. Dr. David Crabb, emergency physician and CEO of Rovex. Dr. Crabb brings a rare dual perspective as a frontline emergency physician and healthcare technology entrepreneur. With deep experience in clinical informatics and hospital workflows, he has spent his career operating at the intersection of patient care, data, and systems efficiency. At Rovex, Dr. Crabb is leading the development of an autonomous mobile robot designed to attach to standard hospital stretchers, safely transporting patients through hospitals while reducing delays, staff injuries, and throughput constraints. In a system where minutes matter and clinicians are already stretched thin, Rovex is applying physical AI and robotics to solve a problem that has remained largely unchanged for decades, that being patient transport. We're going to explore how a frontline problem became a robotics company, the challenges of deploying AI-driven machines in a healthcare environment, and what it takes to introduce an entirely new category of medical technology. Hey, David, are you ready to be our guru today?
Let's do it.
All right, I love it. So we're excited to have you, and tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks. Thanks, Tom, and thanks for having me on. Just really enjoy this opportunity. My background is very much as a math guy. I did math competitions in high school, even some programming competitions, and I really just enjoyed that side of it before getting into the science side later in college and deciding to go to medical school. And so I had grown up in Orlando, Florida, and had a wonderful family that raised me that I love very much and still very much a part of this entire adventure. And so hopefully you'll hear that come out a little bit in the story.
Yeah. I love that background. And, that the math background really, I'm sure, is helping you today quite a bit.
That's correct. It is very much data driven.
Yeah, for sure. And, as we touched on, you have a strong background in clinical informatics. So let's take it a step further. How did working with data and workflows shape the way you saw inefficiencies inside a hospital? Do you have any thoughts or insights for us there?
Yeah, I think the informatics side really gives you a systematic view of the health system. In medicine, you specialize in a certain area of the body or process, and it gives you one perspective that's really important to drill down to the details on. But when you start looking at data overall in a health system, it gives you such a systematic view that it opens up your eyes to some of the other things that need to happen in the hospital for a patient to get care. It's really important for me to know the details of how to diagnose a certain disease and treat it correctly. But it's equally as important that I make sure that that patient knows how to get to the bathroom and that their needs are taken care of in the hospital. They need to get the right food. And so those things are in many ways equally as important as knowing the medical knowledge.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, right? It just, as you mentioned that, it's just, sometimes it's like one simple thing that kind of can create this cascade of backlogs and throw everything off a schedule, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. And the magnification of that happens in the hospital. When you think of it like an assembly line. Now, don't get me wrong, people are not like widgets in a factory, but if you look at it as a process, each step that needs to happen, when one step ends up taking longer than it should, that step, even if in the outside world it doesn't seem as important, can end up becoming a huge bottleneck for everything that occurs in a patient's care timeline. And so overall, they'll think, oh, I just waited in the hospital 10 hours just to get, I don't know, a swab, like a strep swab, and get treated for strep throat. When in reality, a lot of things happened, but one of them took a really long time. And so it made the whole thing take a while.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and kind of leads into my next question actually, because we hear a lot today of the healthcare system talking about staffing shortages, length of stay, throughput, but very little about patient transport. So, kind of building on what we're talking about, why is transport such a hidden bottleneck?
Yeah, I look at a hospital like a miniature city that's moving 24/7. You have the movement of goods, materials, and people in a city. And a lot of times it takes a large ecosystem to help move that. In the real world or in the outside world, you see taxis taking people around everywhere. You see semi trucks moving goods and materials. But in the hospital, we task each health system and the healthcare workers to just kind of figure it out for themselves. And so they are also thinking about all the needs, individual needs of their patients. And so to think of that on top of it, it's so much. And so because of that, you really have to take that systematic logistical perspective and try to turn it into where are the areas that we're slowing down, and what do we need to tweak to really speed that up for the patient, so that ends up not being a big part of their journey. And so a lot of times people look at the transport and they think, oh, they're only going just down the hall. But just down the hall in a hospital, it's 200 yards or more. And now when you talk about taking an individual provider that's mainly focused on they want to get you the right med. They want to make sure that, they have the right diagnosis taken care of. And now we got to think about how to get them 200 yards down the hall. So you're like, oh, that can't be a big deal. And actually it is, because of the number of times it happens. Some hospitals might have 20,000 transports in 1 month. That's a lot of transports when you're multiplying it out. And that could just be a medium-sized hospital. That's not even to mention some of the really big health systems.
Yeah, that's interesting too. When you start thinking about, you got to get the radiology, or you got to get something in the lab, or you got to get somebody to, the cast room or what have you, right? There's a lot of different destinations in there you got to move patients around to, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that ends up being a lot of times basically manual labor of
Hmm.
pushing people around. And so anytime you have people doing some of the manual labor there, when they're also having to be trained at a high level and the intellectual level for around medical diagnoses, medical treatment, all of those things, that combination, you're kind of stressing them in an area that you didn't prepare them for.
Yeah, interesting. And I liked your analogy about the city, right? Because I'm thinking, with your background in the emergency department as a physician, that's really kind of the on ramp, if you will, or the entrance point to that city often, right? So, things like, transport delays and how they impact patient outcomes, leading to clinical frustration and, just overall hospital efficiency. So, how does transport affect that, and how are you kind of smoothing that out now?
Yeah, so in the ER especially, we have people in stretchers and in actually sitting in devices that are more mobile, because we know they need to move around to get all the care that they need. They come in and we don't know all the things that they need right away, but we quickly figure them out and start getting them down those paths. So they might need to go get an X-ray, go get a CT scan, go get an ultrasound, go get an MRI. They might have to have a small procedure somewhere, maybe an eye exam in the eye room. And so there's all this movement that's inherently going to happen as soon as they arrive there, so that you can eventually get them to the steady state of they either need to be admitted upstairs to an inpatient bed, or they need to be able to go home. And so doing all that movement in a short amount of time, you have to coordinate all of that. And so especially when you start, there's so much movement. What can you do to try to speed up that process? And so hospitals have worked pretty hard on things like this, whether it's allocating certain resources around transport to make sure transporters are available, making sure they have certain staff to be able to help with the transports, but it still is an overwhelming bottleneck for them. And so yeah, I've tried to look at it more like a systematic.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I want to just back us up a step now, because making that leap from a clinician to a founder, that's not easy, right? I mean, you've got this whole role, you've studied your whole life to become a physician, and now you're starting a brand new journey. So help us out. What pushed you from recognizing the problem to deciding, hey, I need to, build something to fix this?
Yeah, and I think that's always my biggest push for subject matter experts to really be the ones that help design some of the products and solutions that we need in society. There's really talented engineers out there. Then in their some of their technology that they're working on is amazing. Sometimes that technology, they don't exactly have purpose behind what they're doing just yet, even though the technology is amazing. And so when you really study what problems you're facing, so specifically in healthcare, you're spending tens of thousands of hours in the hospital or in the clinic. And you have certain things that you see along the way come up that are repeated issues that are frustrating you or whatever else. You need to be that voice and helping guide the development of solutions there. The best way to do that for me in this case was to actually step out and be the one leading that group, to be able to provide 24/7 feedback on what we're doing, because it's so complex when you're trying to develop. It sounds so simple, developing something to move someone autonomously down the hall, but it ends up being very complex because there's so many touch points in the process. You can't really make any assumptions along the way. You have to consider the care of the patient along the way. That's what we're caring for. And so trying to take that all into account, I knew that it needed to be me leading that from that perspective. The final piece that helped me make the leap, though, was I found myself thinking about it more and more, trying to provide more and more guidance around my team and what we would do. And then realizing that if I was going to have a split attention between all of my work in the hospital, where I really need to spend a considerable amount of attention focusing on the patient in front of me when I'm there, and then also a significant amount of my attention focusing on the work that we were doing at Rovex. And so at that point, I was like, no, I need to take the leap. It's a calculated risk, if you will, that I know that I always have the opportunity to be able to go back and work in the hospital and work with patients. I intend on doing that in the future because I see that as still my ultimate calling. But I think with this, it's something that it required my full attention to give it its due diligence, because we have an opportunity to impact the world in what we're doing.
Yeah, I would think there's some, mindset shifts that you would have to go through, right? Because being, in emergency medicine and a physician, you're kind of the conductor of the orchestra, right? You're making everything happen. There's people to help you, but sometimes transitioning there to, starting and going into a startup, there's not as many resources, I would think. So, what were the biggest kind of mindset shifts you had to go through to get that going?
There's actually a lot of overlap in the way that we operate, and you mentioned it. Being a person that you have to triage a lot of things in the hospital, and you're leading a team of, sometimes in the ER, 30, 40 people. They all have different roles, different things that they need from you. Being able to triage, being able to address them correctly, and then move from there, and then focus on the highest priority tasks ends up being one of the most important things as an entrepreneur. It just ends up coming out in a different perspective in this, that it's not all about just the medicine side. You just have the alternative disciplines of, the finance side, marketing side, sales side, legal side, all of those pieces that you have to open your mind to. You're like, oh, I wasn't thinking I was going to be reading so many contracts, but here I am spending tons of time reading contracts, and that is very, very important. And so triaging those as far as priorities and importance of what moves us along the most. And then I would say, one of the biggest other mindset shifts is you do still have to keep a level of not abstract, but almost principled thinking. So knowing that, for example, my overall goal as a founder and CEO is generating momentum behind what we're doing. So that can take form in a lot of different ways, but I need to generate momentum, capture that momentum, and then share it with everybody on my team, with the external world, with those that are, potentially wanting to join alongside us, either on the sales side or investment side, things like that. You need to capture that momentum and then share it. And so thinking about that in principled terms, and then letting that kind of guide you as far as the best decisions that you make, versus in the hospital, you might have more obvious priorities that you have to make. You're like, no, the person that's the sickest, it's a principle, but you can generally define that pretty well, who's the sickest one, and that guides you. It's a little more abstract in your thinking. And so I felt like the best way to be able to do that is really get feedback from a lot of people around you and constantly have that conversation, feedback loop back to you. And so I would say that's been one of the biggest differences I've noticed.
Yeah, that's interesting. And in my career, I've spent a lot of time in emergency and critical care medicine. In a way, maybe your background's helped you, right? Because when I watch practitioners in the emergency department or the ICU, right? There's a lot of communication that goes on between team members, whether it's an RN, pharmacy, respiratory therapy, or what have you, right? And oftentimes in corporate America, some of that communication falls down a little bit. Do you think that gave you a unique perspective in this instance?
It does, and especially in the ER. And with the ER, there's that constant communication, as in to the point that they will interrupt you, during anything, as they should interrupt you during anything that you're doing. You might be having a hard conversation with a family, and someone else, they need you right now, and they're going to remove you from the room. And so that conversation is almost so constant. You never fully get used to getting interrupted. Some people handle it better than others. I still, it's a tough part of any job, is getting interrupted in the middle of thought, in the middle of focus. But it almost helps you in something like this, because it allows you to quickly pivot to what is the most important focus, and not have much baggage behind you when you pivot like that.
Yeah, I can see how that would be an asset. So, David, Rovex is developing really an autonomous robot, if I've got this right, that physically will move the patient, right, not just data. I happen to think that that's a really novel application for AI. So I'd like to get your perspective. Why do you believe physical AI is the next major frontier in healthcare innovation?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, I think AI is an amazing progress that we've made as a society. The potential application and time saved for people in general is amazing. It's going to significantly upgrade what we experience. But now the next stage to that is, it can only do it within the digital world. How do we actually have it provide us with saved time in the physical world? We spend a lot of our days, all of us, on physical needs, even in today's day and age. As much like we have amazing technology, we still spend a significant amount of time on some of the simple things. So cleaning, on preparing food, on folding clothes, simple things like that. We all spend a significant amount of time, and so by allowing an opportunity for AI to then physically take care of some of those needs, that just again opens up the further possibility for us to be able to do more things. It does mean likely more leisure time for us as a society, which is great. And then also the opportunity to me that we have more time for thought and progress on many other things that we haven't been able to accomplish before. We're going to rapidly accelerate everything we do. And so in the hospital, we spend a significant amount of time moving things around. And so just the opportunity for AI to be able to assist us in all that movement, so we can get providers back to the bedside, focusing on good hands-on care of patients, and being able to focus on thinking about how to care for a patient rather than spending 30 minutes pushing people around. I think that's a huge opportunity for us.
Yeah. So, you mentioned, the hospitals, and those of us that listen to this podcast, we've all been in medical centers, and integrating into some of that infrastructure is got to be daunting. I'm just kind of thinking, you've got food service carts coming down the hallway, you've got other patients, you've got family members, visitors, volunteers, you got all that stuff moving around. Then you got to maybe take an elevator or two. And, so how does Rovex integrate into this existing, I'm just going to say it, existing messy hospital infrastructure without requiring, massive changes to facilities or workflows? How are you guys doing that?
Yeah, one step at a time. One step at a time for sure. We all view it as it's just a series of challenges that you have to figure out each of the challenges along the way. Hasn't been. It's definitely been solved by other companies in different ways in the past. You just have to learn from their solutions and learn from things that people have done, and then figure out the best way to do it to be able to move around. Luckily, there have been other hospital robotics companies that have been doing this for a long time. Aethon, for example, has been doing it for at least 20 years and really pushed the technology in this space a long way by themselves before others hadn't. And so it's really cool to look at, and I've gotten to speak with their CEO and hear some of their story and everything like that. It's just really cool to see what they've paved the way, I would say, for a lot of this to occur in today's day and age. And so I think it's a really exciting time, not just for us, but for any of the other robotics companies that are even entering the space right now. The groundwork is laid for us to be able to come in and help.
Yeah, I like that. But let's talk a little bit about the trust factor too, right? Because you're moving patients, and patient safety is obviously a big concern. But a lot of folks are concerned about data and AI and all the integrity of that. So with AI and robots in hospitals, how do you build some of those safeguards around trust and safety and workflow? So with your approach and design, how are you assuring that Rovex helps the clinician rather than adding to the burden?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because when I was first starting this from the start, number one value of our company has always been keeping the patient at the center of the work that we do, and the privacy of their data, their making sure that when we're moving around, even anything that we see at the core, the camera level, before we're even storing any of the data, ensuring that it's all de-identified. We can't see the patients essentially. That's been really important to us and actually been a part of what we do to make sure that that we respect that part, because we really want to make sure that part is in place, because I agree that the trust factor with the public is really important. Also making sure that we use AI in the places that we need to use AI and not just using AI just to use AI. And so a lot of that ends up being on the back end and not around anything that has to do with anything with patient data or anything like that. For on our side, there's going to be plenty of inventions around that and trustable companies in that. But for us, as long as we can stay away from it, don't need to use it. Just use it in the places that we need to use AI that can really accelerate and speed us up. Has been important. And then the last thing, also the robot itself, focusing on HRI or human robot interaction. Previously it was human computer interaction, human centered computing, things like that. For us, it's HRI, human robot interaction is really important. Making sure that the robot comes across as trustable. And that means simple things like that it has a way of acknowledging that it sees you when it's going by, so you don't think it's going to hit you, or it comes across in a way that it doesn't look scary, that it doesn't give a malintent when it's coming by, that it actually is disarming when you see it, kind of cute. Those are important things that we focused on because people are in a vulnerable state in the hospital. The last thing they want to do is worry about some computer that's rolling by that they think is going to harm them. You gotta make sure that it's trustable.
Yeah, I like that. And introducing robots into some of these environments it has had to be pretty daunting, especially up front. I mean, it's not like selling software, right? So, what adoption challenges have you encountered, and maybe what surprised you the most with this?
Yeah, I would say, one of the biggest adoption challenges is probably seeing the vision of the future of what it can do, because it's easy for a lot of us to look and say, oh, I don't see many other hospitals doing something like this. Like, I don't know that it's ever going to work. And instead, being able to look and think, no, this is inevitable, that we'll be able to have patients autonomously moved throughout the hospital. Now, who are going to be the ones that are willing to take those first steps with us to be able to make that happen? It doesn't happen in a day. You don't just roll it in, snap your fingers, and it's immediately rolling around with everybody. We have to intentionally roll it out in a safe way. And so I would say that's one of the biggest challenges is getting over that initial visionary hurdle. But sure enough, there are, we live in the United States. There are health systems that are visionary, that do see the future and are willing to innovate in that way and put in the time and the effort to make sure that we do it safely. They want to be a part of that because they know that we're all going to benefit from that. Like, you're going to benefit, I'm going to benefit, we're all going to benefit, because we need to be able to help out the healthcare workers out there, to be able to deliver that care they need. We're already overwhelmed as it is. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah. I would think that would be interesting to the healthcare systems, right? Because I'm thinking of, nursing staff and nursing techs, not to mention, medical staff, but working at the top of your licensure, right? So you're not involved in that transport, but you're working on that next critical patient while you're getting that other one moved along. Am I heading down the right track? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize that healthcare workers, and especially some of the patient care assistants, transporters, they have one of the highest musculoskeletal injury rates of any job in the United States. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's from all of that hidden physical labor that they're doing. And so the last thing you need is your nursing staff that trained for all of these years to learn how to provide compassionate care to patients, then turn around and within a few years sustain a musculoskeletal injury that's going to hamper them for the rest of their career, potentially limit it, make them want to leave the career and do something else. That's not what we need. They went into the field because they want to do it. So now let's offload some of the extra burden that they have and allow them to do exactly what you said, work at the top of their license.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So, David, this has been a really intriguing story in looking at broken systems like you have and finding really, I think, a really novel solution. What advice would you give to other clinicians or other would-be entrepreneurs out there that see an opportunity every day and in thinking about changing and building solutions themselves?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would encourage it because I think it's really what helps drive innovation. But we have to be able to give ourselves that moment to study that problem. Studying the problem, I think, is the most important part. I didn't just look at patient transport one day and say like, oh, we should like build a robot. Robots are cool. No, I looked at a lot of problems and the bottlenecks that we were facing, really triage them down, drill down even further into them. Are there solutions around that? Things like that. So studying the problem, really quantifying that problem. Is that just at my site or is that at every hospital around? That was one of the big aha moments for me, was realizing that I could talk to basically any hospital in the United States or in the world and ask them if they have patient transport problems. And the answer was yes. And so finding that problem, studying it down in detail, and then discovering the solution that you come up with doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to have some level of a solution. And then I would say, go out and talk to people. For me, go out and talk to people smarter than you, smarter than me, that are good engineers, that they are very talented at finding solutions, and they'll be able to help you shape what that solution can look like. And you keep tinkering on that solution until you get there. Problem first. Really important to define that, study it, and drill it down.
Yeah, I like that. That's very, very helpful. Thank you for that. So, David, this really seems like an exciting time for you and your team at Rovex. What does the future hold? Where are you going from here?
Yeah, so we have Rovi, our acute robot that transports stretchers. It's in its initial adoption stages. We're working with several health systems to be able to pilot it and have it start moving just empty stretchers. It needs to go through a full approval process to be able to transport patients, and so we're excited about engaging with that and working on that with those health systems. But we think that there's a lot of opportunity there, even in the early stages, to be able to help out in the hospital, to be able to study those processes and be able to help improve them, even with or without the robot, be able to help improve some of those transport processes, just to try to make things more efficient for the hospital, for the patients, and for the staff. And so we're excited about those stages here in the next year to be able to see some of those come to fruition and see what occurs, and then see it slowly evolve. I think in the future, as we go towards FDA-approved autonomous robots, Rovex is going to be a part of even providing further hands-on patient care in small ways, and then hopefully evolving into larger ways where we can offload that physical burden from our healthcare staff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just thinking as you're talking, even the challenge of taking a gurney or a stretcher down to getting it cleaned or repaired and then back up to where it should be, that's a process in itself, right?
Yeah, and even when a patient is brought upstairs, for example, an inpatient bed, that stretcher's got to come back to the ER, and that requires a person's time to do all of that. And so that especially, we just need to move this piece of equipment back downstairs. Great thing for a robot to take care of.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, David, first of all, I'd like to just acknowledge and thank you for being our guru today. This was really insightful. If somebody wants to learn more about Rovex or yourself, how do we do that? Is there a website? Are you on LinkedIn? How do we find out more?
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people. I'm very responsive on messages, as well as visit our website. Take a look at Rovi, gorovex.com, GOROVEX.com. You'll see some of our renderings of Rovi and all of its glory, and then would love to hear any feedback, thoughts on Rovi, and if you think that you'd love to pilot with us, let me know.
Yeah, I'm going to go check it out for sure. I want to see some of the robot designs and what you guys have going on. So, David, once again, thank you so much for being our guru today. It was really a great conversation, and I enjoyed the insights that you brought for us.
Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048@gmail.com, and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.